there's lots of ways companies can contribute to sustainability, and it's not just by cleaning up their own act and polluting less or doing less damage, and it's not just by writing a check to a nonprofit. I kind of call it going away money, where you just kind of write a check and say, well, we did our part. Thanks, you guys, let us know how it went. Really, companies can engage, they can dig in and get their hands dirty, and they can really have a huge impact on some of these major challenges.
Hey folks, what's happening? Welcome to Your Forest. My name is Matthew Kristoff, and on this podcast, we talk about the environment and the science of sustainability. Today's episode was a lot of fun. I got to speak with a gentleman named Jake Kheel, and he wrote a book called Waking the Sleeping Giant, Unlocking the Hidden Power of Business to Save the Planet. And I can't begin to explain how useful it is and how pragmatic it is. It's really based in real life and not some kind of philosophical journey, right? It's real examples and real cases of when sustainability worked right. And Jake Kheel is an environmental innovator. His efforts in the Dominican Republic with the Groupo Puntacana Foundation, they've won a bunch of awards for the stuff that they've done down there, the work that they've committed for the tourism industry down there and environmental sustainability. Jake also directs the Center for Sustainability, which is a think tank that partners with universities to conduct environmental research, and it also helped pioneer one of the Caribbean's largest coral reef restoration projects. This book tells his story and the story of Groupo Puntacana Foundation and how they took their relatively strange situation as a business trying to in the tourism industry and how they made it a story about sustainability. And it's very real, and it basically breaks sustainability down into a way that kind of demystifies it and makes it understandable. He breaks it down in a way in which sustainability becomes about just solving problems, any problem really, and going about it in a way that makes more sense and just going a little deeper and finding better ways of accomplishing things that are a little outside the box but make complete sense once you do them. And a little bit about collaboration, or a lot about collaboration, I should say, and partnerships and acting locally and just all the benefits that come with having a transparent business that does the right thing because it's the right thing, and how that pays dividends in the long run, fiscally and everything else, right? Like it makes a really strong case for sustainability and makes it really hard to argue against any other action. I really enjoyed it. It was a great book, very down to earth, very pragmatic, like I said, and easy to talk to. I really enjoyed our conversation, and you guys definitely will as well. Sponsors for 2021. West Fraser is the number one sponsor, and I can't thank them enough for their support. It has allowed me to do some pretty cool stuff, and I appreciate them very, very much. So thanks, West Fraser. Greenlink Forestry is also a sponsor of this podcast. They've been with me since the beginning, and I can't thank them enough for their support as well. Damaged Timber is the final sponsor. Damaged Timber is a company that they sell damaged timber. They go out into the bush, cut down wildfire burnt wood, bring it back, turn it into stuff you can put into your kitchen. It's awesome. Check them out. Put in Your Forest 10 at checkout. That's at damagedtimber.com, and you can get 10% off whatever you order. So, yeah, check them out. They're awesome. And, without any further messing around, let's dive into this awesome conversation with Jake, demystifying sustainability, making it real, making it doable, making it understandable. Here we go. Reading this book, it came at a good time for me. Like we were talking about Laura Calandrella's episode, and this kind of fits in well to that conversation into collaboration and building partnerships and that kind of thing. So it came at a great time. And before we dive into your book a little bit, I wanted to just get a little bit of your story and how and why you went down this path of sustainability, like also what keeps you on that path, not just what motivated you to be here, but what keeps you motivated to continue to do this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think my journey was just kind of even as a young kid, I was really into nature and being outside. And, I think like most kids are just attracted to the outdoors and, seeing animals. And we grew up in Southern Florida. And, there's still pretty wild at that point. So there's snakes and lizards all over the place and alligators. And, it was a pretty rural place at the time where we were. And so I was just outdoors all the time with my brother and playing outside and fishing and really just like there was just the place where we, had our childhood was outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
And so that just seemed like just a natural thing to me. And, later when my parents split up, we moved to Massachusetts and we were just kind of outdoors all the time, like out on the ponds and in the marshes and, playing with crabs and fishing and all that stuff. And at a certain point in school, kind of began to get the messaging about environmental issues, and that nature wasn't just this amazing thing out there, but it was actually highly threatened. There was just these major threats facing the environment. And at that time, this is in the 80s, in the early 90s, the threats were, the ozone depletion and pollution and the deforestation of the rainforest. And those were kind of the major concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And people talked a little bit about climate change, but it still seemed kind of like way out there at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to me, it just made this kind of connection. It was like this moment of realization when I was even just still a pretty young kid that, here's this thing I'm really crazy about doing, being outside, being in the woods and being in the pond and the marsh and the forest. And then it's, these are threatened areas and there are places I've never seen around the world, forests and habitats and coral reefs and things that you read about and see on television and nature programs that I've never had the chance to explore that are threatened and, and really, at risk of being destroyed. And so that really struck me as a kid. And I thought, you can either just kind of go through it through ignorance and just continue to be, in love with nature and be outside, or you can try and do something about it. And so that's what started me on this whole journey, environmental protection, and what has evolved slowly into sustainability was really the, realization that something had to be done. There had to be something that I could contribute in some way or another in actionable items to try and help protect the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really kind of what got me into it. And, from there, you as a young kid, you sort of start and, what can I possibly do? When you're young, you don't really have any skills or knowledge or experience. So how much
trying to find your path, right? Where to start.
Right. How much can you actually contribute? And I think when I started, I was probably pretty radical at the time. It's like, at defense of the environment at the risk of everything else. Like, who cares about the economy? We have to sacrifice whatever in order to protect the environment.
A lot of emotion, not a lot of facts.
Yeah, and also just experience and getting to know what happens in the world. And over time, I've realized that what has fascinated me about the area of sustainability is trying to find solutions to these very complex challenges that balance the environment with other interests. It's not just the environment. You really need to have local people and local communities benefiting, whether you're in Nebraska or you're in Dominican Republic. And you really need to have economic growth because, if people can't get ahead in life and can't improve their livelihoods, then, they're not going to have a ton of interest in protecting the environment. And then you've got to have the environment because so much of what our economy and our well-being is dependent on comes from nature and from the environment. So this intellectual challenge of finding this balance between these three really important goals has just fascinated me, and that's my passion and what's driven me.
Absolutely. No, that's great. And that leads me perfectly into my next kind of question, like, because you have this book, Waking the Sleeping Giant, Unlocking the Hidden Powers of Business to Save the Planet, and it's all about sustainability and all that kind of thing. And I thought I'd get, you kind of answered it already, but I'll ask you anyways and see if you come up with something else. But I wanted to get your definition of sustainability.
Yeah, I think, I try not to get too theoretical about it. The kind of academic exercise behind this, and there's so many changes in terminology and new ideas and new names for very similar things. So I try not to get too bogged down in that. I think, to me, sustainability is really trying to find solutions to big global challenges that balance these interests of economic growth, environmental protection, and local communities and the health and well-being of local people. So that's where I define it. I try not to get too crazy because I work in the tourism area, and there's sustainable tourism, responsible tourism, geotourism, ecotourism, and it's like people get so bogged down in these definitions, and generally speaking, we're talking about the same thing, but we tend to really drill down, and then it's not this, but it's that. And it's happening a little bit with sustainability, that people are getting so bogged down in the idea and the theory behind it that we're forgetting that you need to have action. You need to have concrete examples of the way this gets done. And that's what I was trying to do with the book, is sharing examples of what sustainability actually looks like concretely. How do we define it by things that we've created or done and solutions that we've found?
Mm-hmm. No, that's exactly kind of what I got from the book, right? Like, one quote I actually pulled from you from the book was, sustainability tries to sort out how to achieve abundant and healthy nature while accounting for the ever-expanding footprint of human beings on the planet, which I thought was just this perfect little snippet of like explaining sustainability. Because I think, like you said, some people take sustainability to mean like, oh, you're a crazy, like, radical environmentalist and you don't care about the economy or whatever. And it's like, no, sustainability encompasses all of those things, right? Like they neither one can exist without the other. So I really appreciated the you know what I mean, the easy layman nature in which you encapsulize that. And it didn't go to that ethereal level of like, well, what is consciousness or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, so,
Exactly.
So I really appreciated that in this book, and that, the concrete, like the examples that you had, you walked us through the entire journey of, and it's Groupo Puntacana.
Right.
That's the foundation, right?
Yeah, that the Groupo Puntacana is the name of our parent company that I work for. And Groupo Puntacana Foundation is sort of the nonprofit division of the company.
Okay.
And I think I like also that I've learned about sustainability is, to me, sustainability is all about creativity. It's all about, being flexible and finding new ways to do things. And it's, kind of playing in the gray area and, really celebrating nuance. And I think in recognizing that each local situation is its own universe, right? So the things that have worked for us in Groupo Puntacana, I can go 10 miles down the road, and some of these ideas and things that we've done wouldn't work at all. Just 10 miles down the road. So imagine trying to apply it to some other country or some other place. But I think that's what's the beauty for me in the whole idea of sustainability. It's really flexible. It's about, using your creativity to come up with solutions for these really complicated challenges. And that's what's really driven me towards this field. And, I kind of stand by sustainability, even as people are trying to change the name and change it into new things.
Yeah, no, for sure. I get that. There's a lot of that going on, a lot of trying to change the word so it's has less of that context for it, or the negative context for it, right? But yeah, it's that's what I liked about the book, though, is that those concrete examples, even though they're not familiar to me, like I don't live in the Dominican Republic, I live in in Canada, and where it's cold and stuff. So, but what they did do was provided some concrete examples of where to start and how to begin. And like, oh, we have this issue of garbage, and like, okay, let's slowly go down that path one step at a time. And we have this issue of, we have too much seaweed on shore. Like, how do we deal with that? And then every problem kind of led into another problem, and they all ended up being sustainability issues, which was, it was really interesting to see the step-by-step process you took to try to tackle these issues and how it's created this massive sustainability driver in the region for not just for the company itself, but for the local community and all that kind of stuff, right? So I wanted to talk to you about like this whole idea of locking the hidden power of business to save the planet, right? I think there's people that understand that that's a potential, right? That businesses they have the capacity, but I think I would consider it a misunderstanding that businesses have to be they have to be donating and doing that kind of thing, like just fiscally donating to actual projects to try and get sustainability online. But you've painted a different picture of actual just involvement and engagement that makes it seem a little more doable.
Yeah, I really believe, and this is not to say that companies shouldn't fork over huge amounts of money to solve these problems. Amen. Hopefully, every company builds a gigantic, enormous fund to fund, problem solving to global challenges. I mean, that would be fantastic. And many companies are starting to do that, and many individual philanthropists are doing that. But I think the way I visualize the untapped power of companies to solve these challenges is applying this human resources and capital that they have built into their company to different challenges, not just to the challenge of making money or selling a product or marketing a product, but really taking this amazing ingenuity and creativity and innovation that companies have that they're currently applying to many different things. And, there's no problem, but, applying all of your knowledge and your skills to making money and selling a product. But I think there's also huge room for companies to, make it part of their business to solve big environmental and social challenges. And so that's what we've been trying to do when Groupo Puntacana is, really using the company as a laboratory, using the company as a think tank, and using the company sort of as a guinea pig for experimentation. And I don't know, my boss or the rest of the people in my company would appreciate that I'm using the company as a guinea pig, but I really think that's the case. When you mention the problem of garbage, is there a place around the world that doesn't have some problem with garbage? I mean, even the best developed countries, there's some issue with garbage. And so there's something to be learned everywhere. And so I think if companies are really putting their mental energy into solving some of these challenges, we're really going to make some big advances. And so companies can be seen in a bunch of different ways as relate to these environmental and social challenges around the world. But I think one way that we're not necessarily seeing them as, innovation hubs for solving problems. I think that's really where we can do that. We can pull this unique and inherent power that companies have out of them and not necessarily take them out of their goal and their objectives of, being successful businesses. I think Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia, said, it's fine to be crazy as long as you're successful. Otherwise, you're just crazy. The business has got to work. You can't be, just doing these crazy ideas and you're having your business flop. But both things got to happen. So I think that's where the point I try to make in the book is that there's lots of ways companies can contribute to sustainability. And it's not just by cleaning up their own act and polluting less or doing less damage. And it's not just by writing a check to a nonprofit, I kind of call it going away money, where you just kind of write a check and say, well, we did our part. Thanks. You guys, let us know how it went. Really companies can engage, they can dig in and get their hands dirty, and they can really have a huge impact on some of these major challenges.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what was kind of empowering about the book, was that it brought out those opportunities, and where those opportunities start small, they can turn into fiscal benefit as well as community and environmental benefit, right? So it was really cool to watch you connect the dots between all these things. And I've never really seen it. I've never seen an example where it's been written down this detailed, right? So it's really cool to see. And so I imagine you run across people a lot of times, people that run business, CEOs and that kind of thing. that probably have questions about sustainability, right? And it's kind of a buzzword, like we said before. People want to be sustainable. They want to be part of the solution, right? I don't think that it's more of they don't know where to begin, or they don't know. It's the demystifying of sustainability, right? It's this mystified word that we're not really sure how to pin down. So how would you start to answer the question of like from a CEO or something like that, of how do I begin to do this, and how do I begin to incorporate it into my business so that my business is also successful in the long run, and you know what I mean, continues to grow as a result of the sustainability, not treating sustainability as a cost, but as an actual opportunity.
I think the key is to keep it as simple as possible, and talk to people in the language that they understand. You can't go to a CEO. In most cases, it's hard to go to a CEO and start talking about all the reasons why we need to, save the endangered, flying fox, and why the company should have this great passion for this issue. It's got to come from the perspective of the company. Like, generally people, and especially companies, are thinking all the time, what's in it for me? What do I get out of this?
That's my point. Yeah. Like how do you convince them that this is not just the next philanthropist move? This is actually something that is good for business.
Yeah. And I think that usually comes in sort of a temperature check of the company. And most companies have some big issue, right? They have some challenge that they constantly face. They have some problem that's just recurring. And often, by looking at it through the lens of sustainability, you find some pretty interesting solutions. So I can give some good examples. A lot of companies suffer from, brain drain. They lose their personnel regularly. People move on, kind of use them as a stepping stone or get it on their CV and then get a better job. And in certain markets, there can be fierce competition. In the tourism market where I work, it's very competitive. People are always looking to steal each other's good staff, especially in the region where we are in Punta Cana, where we're pretty remote. We're not out, in the big city. So to get people to move out here and, commit to being in the tourism industry, that you've already kind of got a limited pool, and then to keep them and to be able to continue building around them, it's a big challenge. So one of the strategies is, how do you get people to really buy in to a company and really feel like they're part of something, and get them to feel like this is not just a job. This is not just a paycheck. This is like a community that I'm part of, and I'm solving problems that have a much bigger impact than just me. And people really buy into that. It sounds like kind of, Zen, rah stuff, but really,
I'm on board. I'm totally on board.
Yeah. I think people, you would just be surprised how often people feel like if they are part of a bigger mission within that company, and the company is really committed to something, people will stick with the company, and it keeps from having staff turnover. It keeps from having to constantly retrain people. It keeps from losing your best people, and those are serious costs to company. I mean, keeping your best people on board for as long as possible is a challenge in a lot of industries, and having a real mission, a social or an environmental mission, is a way for people to identify with the company. And I think that's even becoming more and more the case as younger people coming into the workforce have a much bigger vision for this, right? They're much more into, what is this company doing to solve an environmental problem, or what is their sustainability commitment, or have they made some commitment on, eliminating single-use plastics, to name a specific issue, or what are they doing in their local community? How are they investing? What does their carbon footprint look like? How do they treat gender issues? So many different issues nowadays that companies really have to take a position on, and those can be huge advantages if you're really thoughtful about it. And so I think that is, if you're a CEO, and you work in Silicon Valley, and there's major pressure for keeping smart people around, having a mission-driven company with a really good social vision, that can be a huge competitive advantage. And I think that, the key is talking to people from the place they're at, and really trying to identify the problems that they face without trying to force your point of view or your mission on them. And I think that there's a huge potential for that. And I think, CEOs respond to that.
Hmm. Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. I think that was like perfectly worded. I think that there's an old school way of thinking about a career or a job, right? And people were just thankful to have full-time work, right? And like, I got a paycheck. I got you know what I mean? I can go home to my family every night. This is good. Like, I better hold on to this. But I think as generations has moved on, we've kind of gotten away from that and more into well, what does this do to solve some of the world's problems? How does this fulfill me? How does this make me feel good, right? Like, people don't want to go to work and feel like a worker bee. They want to go to work and feel supported and feel uplifted and to feel empowered somehow, right? And I think that's absolutely true in that realistically, you're gonna keep better people if those people feel some kind of loyalty to that company, and the loyalty comes through being a part of something bigger, right? And I love that idea, and I think that for companies that don't recognize this, they don't recognize that the appreciation of your employees and making them feel part of something bigger, part of a bigger solution. Those companies are going to go, belly up at some point, because it's becoming so normalized where people just want that full incorporation of all their ideas into their job, not just have it be a paycheck, right? So I like that a lot. I think you're right. I think sustainability plays a huge role in that, in helping people feel that, I don't know, that bigger fulfillment somehow, right?
Yeah, and I think there's so many layers to this too. You can talk about it from, a human resource and keeping your talented folks around because they feel committed to something. I think it also can just be a really powerful part of the company that is a big problem solver. And so we find this all the time. In tourism, we are constantly facing new threats and new risks and new challenges, whether it's, in 9/11, the terrorism attacks, that affected tourism. So then you've got to adapt right away. So now all of a sudden we're very concerned about security. So a lot of thought goes into a company of how to become more secure, how to get people to feel like traveling is still safe. Then we have the economic collapse in 2008. And so all of a sudden people are thinking about, how can I save a little money but still have a good vacation? What other things can I do when I travel? Then we get into, hurricane events. We're constantly dealing with, the different effects of climate change and just of being in the tropics. So we're always adapting to tropical diseases, malaria. We've had a disease called Zika down here a few years ago. We had another one most people have forgotten about, chikungunya, which we had in the Dominican Republic. We've had now, a global pandemic that's, outsized impact on the tourism industry. So you have all of these challenges coming at you constantly. And so sustainability really kind of sharpens your skills at responding to big new challenges and being able to adapt to that. And I think a lot of CEOs really respond to that language. Most CEOs, if you told them, you have a very bureaucratic and slow moving company, they would be horrified. Most CEOs picture their company as agile, flexible, adaptable, can move on a dime. And those are skills you pick up from adapting in real time, and sustainability is a big part of that. So I think, it's really, I always think of sustainability. When people ask what it is, it just really depends who you're talking to. So if I'm talking if I'm talking to the CEO, it's one thing. If I'm talking to the VP of marketing, it might be a little bit different. If I'm talking to the maintenance department, it might be something different. So I think there's a value there for everybody, but it's really trying to find that value and really explain and show people how this can contribute to their problems and to their challenges they face on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Absolutely. So how do you find, as a Groupo Puntacana became more sustainable with time, and you guys started to tackle, like, I can just start to list some of the stuff that you guys did. Like, you started the local, you'd list it, the medical stuff, the water, the everything. You just list the accomplishments they've had, and then I'll go on to my question. I think it's important.
Yeah. Well, I think in our case, we have this very unique history that I kind of take through in the book, in Waking the Sleeping Giant. Our history is basically, the eastern end of the Dominican Republic in the 60s was completely uninhabited. And then the founders of our company went about trying to turn it into a tourism destination. And so you can imagine that the only thing they had were challenges in front of them. They had no electricity, they had no water, they had no infrastructure, they had no roads, they had no airport, they had no tourists, they had no city, they had nothing basically. And so all they had was challenges. And as things continued to evolve, and as they had success, and as they built an airport and they got roads built and other hotels started to get established, and it really started to take off as a tourism destination, the challenges never went away. They just changed. So we had, at the beginning, in the early days, we didn't have electricity. Well, now we have electricity, but how do we have clean electricity? In the early days, we had water, underground water in aquifers, but how do we get it? And then once we were able to get it, okay, how do we protect it? So these issues have just continued to evolve over time. And at the very beginning, we had no one living out here. There was no big cities or urban centers around. And as tourism grew and as there became more economic opportunity, it was a magnet for people from all over the island, including, Santo Domingo and all the different parts of the Dominican Republic. The DR also shares the island with Haiti. And so you had a huge influx of people from Haiti and from other parts of the DR. And so as you started to have these urban centers built, you have all kinds of other new challenges that came, whether it was health for the local community or education for kids in these communities. So as each of these successive challenges came about, our company really saw opportunities to use what we're able to do and what we're capable of as a company to solve, some of these big challenges. And, we didn't get into all of them at once. The company has been around for 50 years. So, when we got into doing coral reef restoration, 16 years ago, I don't know that anybody knew we would be doing it for this long and it would be this much of an ongoing commitment. But as we got into it and we got, more experience, got better at it, built up partnerships, where there were still other challenges out there that needed to be confronted. And so we just kind of gradually kept taking things on until now we have this, rather all-encompassing portfolio of sustainability projects that go from running 2 health clinics, running 2 public schools, managing, full integrated waste management system for our entire resort, influencing water, not just for our property, but also for the entire region, coral reef restoration, working with local fishermen to try and reduce overfishing pressures. I mean, basically working with endangered species like an endemic hawk species. And it's just been kind of this rambling journey in sustainability where we've found that we can add value, we can help create positive change, and we can have an impact, and we can still continue to be an extremely successful business. And in fact, in many ways, all of these initiatives have really added to the value of the company and made us a much more interesting and much more adaptable and innovative company, but also just a great place to work that people want to be part of. They feel like they're, really contributing to something more important than beyond just the paycheck.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly my thought, is that your entire organization is completely integrated into the local community and the local environment. And you got your hands in everything in the way that you're trying to help solve these issues. Cause if you can solve the issue of, undereducation or poor water quality for the communities, or the, overfishing, or all these things contribute to this. Having a more sustainable area contributes to better business in the end, right? So it ends up being good for everything. But my question was going to be, when you have employees that recognize all these things, that you have a responsible company that's looking at everything and always trying to find ways to solve not just their problems, but local problems. Do you find it changes the atmosphere? Does it change employee appreciation? Like, I guess it does. We discussed that, but does it change the way ideas flow and how the business works?
Yeah, I could give you a good example, I think, that happened really recently, and these are my favorite examples of sort of sustainability initiatives in our company are the ones that I had nothing to do with. They're the ones that came from some other part of the company that were born of their own own genius, and then were kind of brought to us saying, hey, we're doing this, or we want to do this, or we thought of this. Can you guys help us turn this into like a full-fledged project? I love when that happens because it means that your company is really assuming sustainability and innovation as like the basic fabric and functioning of the operations. So we had, the human resources department, they ran a Shark Tank, kind of a competition for ideas. And it was all over the company. And the only requirements was that you had to partner with two other areas. Like you couldn't just be, in the hotel. You had to be the maintenance department, the hotel, and somebody else. And the winning project was a bartender from the Westin, from the hotel, working with someone from the solid waste management, from the garbage collection company, and working with somebody else who was, I think, in the maintenance department. And these guys figured out, a very, artisanal, small scale project of transforming specific types of plastic that don't have a recycling market, plastics that we can't currently sell as recyclables, because we're able to commercially sell, PET plastic and HDPE plastics, but there are many other types of plastics that just don't have any use. And they just become trash or whatever else you can find to do with them. And so in this case, these guys said, well, we're not going to touch any of the plastics that have a current value because that would just be duplicating efforts. But we'll take everything else and we'll try and grind it up, melt it down, and turn it into molds and make stuff out of it. And these guys literally were working in, the oven at the hotel. They were using a blender that they bought at the local store, and they started melting this stuff down, and then they started polishing it, and this is all very handmade, rudimentary. But then they started really getting, fine tuning it. And then they started, making plastic molds for different materials. They won this competition, the Shark Tank, and then they, presented it to our executive committee, which is all, the president, VPs, and, kind of higher ups in the company. And then, we did a site visit to a plastic recycling company in Santo Domingo. We started looking at like what a whole project would look like in terms of buying the equipment and, what kind of materials could we replace within the resort. For example, at the Westin, they use these specific card keys that are, magnetized, and in the door there's a piece of plastic. And if you buy it from the Westin, and this piece of plastic is incredibly expensive, but it's basically just a crappy piece of plastic, but it has to be in a certain shape. And so they figured out they could make it on their own, and they started replacing it, and creating a savings and using something. But not to go on and on about this example, but what I really liked about it is, one, it just started, it was in the context of our company and in the different resources of our company. And it wasn't, the eco guy or the sustainability person pushing this initiative. Like this came right out of the areas. And they, the bartender said, yeah, I see a ton of plastic bottle caps, at the end of the day. And I thought, what a waste. Like, what can we do with these? And that's basically how it was born. And so if you can get that replicated happening all the time in your company, you really have like a huge potential to be transformative.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But you only get that kind of commitment and that kind of ingenuity when people are committed to the company, right? And so that's what's interesting about it, is that by tapping into this resource, like everybody has ideas, everybody has a different perspective. And when you start to bring those perspectives together, you never know what might be a solution to one of your major problems that your company has. But if you have employees that are dedicated because they believe that this company is in it to not just make money, but to also do the right thing and, quote unquote, want to get hippie about it, save the planet, right?
Right.
And that's what makes people want to commit and makes people want to, put in the extra hours and the extra effort to try to see that company succeed. And when you have buy-in from the employees to have, they want the company to succeed, then it's way harder to kill that company. It seems like it's just hard for companies to pivot to this point and to realize this, because like that example you gave, right? As simple as it is, it's still very complicated. But you needed those people, like those specific people, to figure it out. You're not going to get the CEO's not going to sort that out. Right. So it's almost like the sustainability has allowed you to tap into the creativity of your entire staff, which has only heightened the total loyalty and the total capacity of that company to succeed, right? Which is just it's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, and the thing I loved about this example, for example, was the enthusiasm that our CEO and our executive committee had for the project. There's a whole other way of looking at this. Is like, what the hell were you guys doing? What shouldn't you be selling more beverages and upselling, cocktails
Right,
and and
right.
saying like, why are you wasting our time solving a bottle cap issues? How about selling more, pina coladas or whatever? But I think the enthusiasm the company had was, we want our people thinking and we want our people coming up with solutions to problems we have and saving us money. And we think that it contributes value around the resort, not just from a sales perspective. I think that creating that environment where innovation is thought of as a positive is very important. And I think one of the other upsides of this, is when you look at a company like ours, like if you think about Groupo Puntacana, as we're known in the Dominican Republic and in the Caribbean and in the sort of hospitality tourism industry, is we are that company that's willing to do things that nobody else is doing. So we are the resort that has, used worm composting to transform food waste into compost and then use it on golf courses for fertilizer. We're the company that's allowed the Peregrine Fund to come in and utilize the resort as a wildlife refuge for an endangered hawk species. So we're kind of this quirky space that people know it, and they know that we're not afraid of, kind of quirky projects and sustainability projects. But that also has an upside of exposing us to a lot of new ideas that, if you're a very staid, kind of, vanilla company that just is all about making money and it's not real receptive to new ideas, then people are not going to bring you new ideas. And so you miss out on a lot of potential and a lot of possibilities. So I think that's one of the other upsides of being kind of a pioneer and kind of being, far out there in the world of sustainability is we hear about new crazy ideas probably as soon as they come out, and somebody's trying to sell them to us or trying to partner with us to advance it, or trying to tell us that this would make sense for us and we should do it ourselves. But we get exposure to a lot of unique, ideas and technologies and new projects that maybe other types of companies just don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I love the idea and how all encompassing it is, right? The idea of sustainability and how it encompasses all aspects of everything is it just heightens everything in the end if it's done thoughtfully, right? I wanted to get into a really interesting part of the sustainability question and the sustainability how-to is you talked a lot about the integrating of the business into the local community and trying to solve local problems. Do you think that's like there's such power? You mentioned like the local company has such investment and dedication to that local area that they might be they're the ones who can make these changes, but it's hard for them to see supporting, community good as good for business. So it's hard to sell to whomever, right? The executives or something like that. How do companies start to see these collaborations, these partnerships with local community and local groups as opportunities instead of just, something that's going to cost them money?
Yeah, I think it's really clear the relationship with the local community and local environment in tourism, right? And especially in coastal tourism, like in the Caribbean, where people are coming to see the beach and to interact with the local people and the local culture. And they want to hear the local music and the local food. And they really want like a local experience, even if people, are just looking for a safe place to go to the beach in the Caribbean with, a really good all-inclusive buffet. Most of those people after a couple of days are going to get bored in the hotel and want to leave and go see something. Even the least adventurous person is not going to spend all 10 days or 7 days of their vacation at the resort.
Right.
And so if you think of it that way, then it becomes really important to think about the local community as an extension of the resort, as part of your business. The safer it is outside the resort, the more opportunities to interact with local people that the tourists have, the more better experiences they have, very positive, fun experiences they can tell other people about. That just builds the destination as a much stronger destination, a better place to go. It makes you more competitive. If you go to destination A and the people just look at tourists and say, here are these gringos, ruining our town, and, it's terrible. We don't get any benefit out of it. And then you go to destination B and the local community is super welcoming, super fun. They grab the tourists and dance with them on the street and, bring them into their house to feed them coffee and show them the local culture. That really has a big impact on where people want to go, and what people talk about when they talk about a certain place. And I think that's, it's a very key piece of the tourism question. People are looking for new experiences. They're not just looking for, a vacation by itself. They want something they can go home and talk about, and they can post on Instagram and they can share with their friends and show you videos of, and, I got to do this, and nobody, something really unique that I'll remember for the rest of my life. That's what tourism should be. And so that means, the local businesses really have to invest in that community. If your local community people are not healthy, if they're worried about their kids, if they have, somebody has a disease or some kind of health issue, those things get reflected in their performance in front of tourists, in their job performance. So I think in tourism, the case is really clear. You have people traveling from far away to see the local environment, the beaches and the freshwater swimming lagoons that we have here, and go snorkeling on the reef, and all these attractions that you have in the Caribbean and the Dominican Republic. But they're also coming to have this experience with the local culture and experience that local food, the local cuisine, the local music, the dance, the warmth of the local people. And so it's in our interest to invest in those two assets, in our human resources and our natural resources. So tourism, the case is super clear. I think in each industry, you have to see it in its own context, whether you're a mine and you have to think about what's going on around you. If you're, running a forestry company and you got to, think about the impact on the local community. I think there's always some way that the local community is integrally tied into your business. And you shouldn't and can't really ignore it. And I think it's in the best interest of companies to really identify the ways that the local community impact their business and try and ensure that those become a positive and not a negative.
Absolutely. And beyond just providing jobs, right? Like, I feel like beyond that, there's more that companies can do that they will see a return on investment on, right? That's evident through the book, that the more that companies put into their local community, the more they're going to get back from it in the end, right? And then it adds into the employee appreciation and the loyalty and the everything, right? Like like I said, it's all encompassing, right? It's very, very cool. And there was a part in the book where you spoke about a certain gentleman, I believe he was a researcher, and he came to the realization that the local, like focusing on a local, very specific area for like conservation purposes, for example, is the key to making real change. Not doing these broad strokes of like, deforestation is bad or whatever, but actually focusing on like solving deforestation in like one small spot and conserving that spot, and how the power of companies that are in that area, in that local area, the power that they have, the connectedness that they have in that area to try to solve that problem and actually be that solution, right? It was interesting to see the connections there, and how that connectedness, like I think you spoke about it as the connectedness of business with the specific skill sets of like non-for-profits is like it's a deadly combo.
That's right. Yeah, I think maybe one of the examples I think you're referring to is kind of working really intensively in one spot and really being place-based about your activities for sustainability, or in this case conservation. The example I think I used was Dan Jansen. Who's a very famous, very distinguished researcher from University of Pennsylvania, and he spent his career basically head down studying all types of aspects of ecology, biology, evolutionary biology, and was just a machine cranking out scholarship, and really never made the connection of what was happening to what he was studying. what was happening to these beetles that he was studying, or these lizards, or whatever species he happened to be looking at. Was there some threat to these species? And then he got very involved in Costa Rica and really stopped doing this kind of global research where he was working all over the world and in all kinds of habitats, and really just settled down into the Guanacaste area in Costa Rica. And that to me was a really powerful example because, I just felt like he could do so much more by focusing all his efforts on this one place and this one issue and this one type of forest than trying to be everywhere all the time and do everything. And it's not to criticize folks that are traveling all over the world and spending, 2 weeks a year in each spot and, running projects and grants or whatever. That's, I think there's some value in that. But I think in terms of solving problems and really engaging with these issues locally, you really kind of got to settle in. There's a woman we work with in Belize, Lisa Carnes. Who does coral restoration, and she's not a scientist, but she's spent, the last 15 or 20 years working on coral restoration, and she's basically become as knowledgeable about coral restoration as anybody, any scientist out there. And I see her speak at these conferences, and she cracks me up because she stands up in front of a room full of scientists and says, we work on this 24/7, 365 a year. I'm not coming down on my spring break. I don't come down on my summer break. I don't come down when I've got, a good long weekend. I do this all the time as a full-time job. And it wasn't, she's kind of like tweaking a little bit the academics because a lot of them are doing these research projects, when they can, when they're not teaching or whatever. But I really think that kind of focus is what we need in certain instances. I think I sort of pictured myself when I was starting out my career as working in the conservation world and, kind of jet setting around and, spending some time in Madagascar and having a research site in Peru and, swinging through Thailand and, having this global conservationist, point of view. But when I got sort of drilled into working in one site in Punta Cana, in one resort, Groupo Puntacana, and really working on very specific sustainable tourism issues, I felt like I was just having so much more of an impact and was really able to focus my energy on these challenges that I felt like I could contribute way more, and sometimes I guess I'm jealous of these jet setters, but in some ways, but, I think in general, I feel like my impact is greater when I'm just, nose to the grindstone and cranking on the problems we face on a day-to-day basis in one spot.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the power of businesses to contribute to that one spot because they already have buy-in, right? They already are dedicated to that location. And the more integrated they become in the community and everything else, then just seems those sustainability initiatives just have infinite return on investment, right? Which is really, really cool to see just how, when you really start to go down the rabbit hole of sustainability and that kind of thing, it really becomes hard to argue against being sustainable as a company, right? Like it's just for long-term gains, long-term success, it's really the only way. Like I can't imagine someone successfully arguing the case against it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the way I explain it often through the book is, my single-minded focus and mission is to solve environmental problems. But the way that happens, the way that you sort of co-opt a company into doing that is showing the company how sustainability creates return, creates value for the company.
You have to make the business case. Yeah,
that's right. And it really, it's true. It does make the business case. It's not always a direct, return on investment. I spend this much, I get this much back, and it just paid for itself. It's not always like that. But there's huge marketing and image value for companies. That's kind of like the low hanging fruit. We call it greening, different from greenwashing, but greening is basically like, in using the good things that you do to enhance your image as a company. I think that's not necessarily a bad thing if you're really doing the work. So greening is an important piece for companies because so much of what we do nowadays as companies is your image, what people think of you, the way the customer perceives you as a company, whether you're a good company or not. Another is efficiencies all over the company. There are ways to save money and to produce efficiencies in your operations by thinking through this lens of sustainability, whether it's energy efficiency, water efficiency, handling your waste better. As we talked about before, not having to cycle through tons of new employees all the time because you have, employee retainment. That's a big efficiency. And then the other is, this putting on this innovation mindset, this idea that your company is capable of creating these leapfrog moments, whether it's a new technological advance or a new way of doing business that just puts you way ahead of the competition, and not in an incremental way. It just kind of lands you way ahead of the competition in one big jump and a leapfrog. And sustainability really trains your company to help do that. So I think there's real value in sustainability. It's not always just a numerical thing where 1+1=2. It's sometimes it really is the way that it changes the culture in your company, when it changes the capacity of your company to do new things and to adapt to change, and also the way others and your customers and your visitors and your clients view your company. That's incredibly important. Do I go to this resort because I know they're doing good things, or I go to another one even though I know they've raped and pillaged the land, but they've got a really nice swimming pool? Well, a lot of people are going to lean towards the company that's doing the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it just seems like society's moving that way in general, right? Like people, you can't work in a black box anymore as a company. Like everything's just out there, whether you're a publicly traded company or not. It's just things get out, right? So it's just exciting to hear the success that Groupo Puntacana has had, and how much success, not just as a company, but as the community has flourished according to the book, right? Like it seems like everything around there is just doing well. Like the community, the environment, everything just seems to be working great, which is awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to, paint a fantasy. We still have lots of challenges. Every day is a new challenge, and the pandemic has really stretched us as an industry, in the tourism and travel industry in general. But I think part of the resiliency we have as a destination is because of this, real commitment to sustainability. We're finding the way, and we're always trying to find the way because of the skills and the experience we've had created through this commitment to sustainability. And I think that's incredibly important. One thing I did want to say, I think is also very important. When you mention how much success we've had, I would say part of the reason we've had so much success is because we're not afraid to embrace and share failure. I think a big part of sustainability is really, embracing when you totally flop. You really have to embrace that, because that's how you learn, that's how you improve, and that's really how you build this kind of this resiliency muscle, be able to keep going after it and being perseverant, and keep grinding until you get it right. Many of our projects were not super successful to start with. And it took some time to get them going, and it took some perseverance, and I think that's where the payoff has been, is in that process of learning and that process of kind of failing forward.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's not everything's a home run. And I don't think you painted that picture in here at all. You painted that it was a lot of work, and it took a lot of ingenuity, and it took a lot of partnerships, a lot of outside sourcing of different groups that had different interests and trying to collaborate. But in the end, like you said, you're going to fail a bunch for sure. But in the end, you're going to come out with something that's super valuable. And it was just exciting to see a case, like an actual case for businesses being so integrated into this idea, right? And you were kind of touching on the idea of failure, right? And the importance of transparency to business success and sustainability. Can you just explain that a little bit? Like, what do you mean by transparency in business, and why is that important? Why is it crucial to what you guys have accomplished?
One of our realizations over the years has been that you're not going to get it right the first time. In startups and in with entrepreneurs, the idea of starting with one idea and realizing that it's kind of right but not 100% right, and having to pivot that idea and pivot the mission of a company or the type of product you sell. For startups, that's celebrated. That's a good thing. A CEO who's willing to be a little bit flexible and to recognize where their strengths are and where their opportunities are is a good thing. And so I think in sustainability, we really need to have that same mindset. You're not going to nail it the first time, most of the time. And so you've really got to be willing to stick to things and play around and be willing to adapt and make them work. And I think that's something that's been really important to us. And again, for the example of tourism, it's to me, it's become so obvious that when you are a resort like ours in a destination, we're not competing against the hotel next door to us or the hotel down the road or the hotels to the north of us. In our case, we're all trying to push Punta Cana forward as a destination. We want people to fly into Punta Cana as opposed to flying into, some other destination, Jamaica or Bahamas or Cancun. And so, the more I can do to convince my neighbors and my related companies and, the other hotels in the region to behave better and to do a better job managing their water, their garbage, their energy, their coral reefs, everything I can do in my experience that helps them improve their experience is a win for our destination. And that's been our mindset from our foundation and from Groupo Puntacana in general. I think that's somewhat rare in companies, the willingness to share what you've learned and what you've succeeded at and what you've really failed at, and really try and convince other companies that they should get on board. I think that's becoming the norm in Punta Cana. For years, many of the other hotels in the regions just looked at us and said, yeah, well, you guys are just weird because your CEO is really into this stuff. And, you own and operate the airport. And so you have this, kind of cash cow, revenue generator that gives you some flexibility to be involved in kooky, sustainability projects. And I think more and more these hotels are saying, wait a minute, our customers care about this stuff. Our employees care about this stuff. The market cares about this stuff if they happen to be, publicly traded. And now, in many of these hotel chains that are, second, third, fourth generation, that later, newer generation coming through is a little more schooled in sustainability. They're not the kind of the old school founder of the company or whatever, from a different era. Now they're coming up and, they're from good families and they're getting invited to these big conferences and they're going to these big meetings and the people are asking them, what's your company doing? What are you into? What's your sustainability mission? What are you guys contributing to the conversation? And if you don't have an answer to that, then it's kind of embarrassing. So I think, now many of these companies are no longer looking at Punta Cana as this kind of quirky group of weirdos that have been worm composting for 15 years. They're looking at us as, a potential source of ideas and things that they could apply on their own properties.
Yeah, absolutely. It just drives that innovation, right? People want to be a part of something good. And I really enjoyed everything in the book, and it really painted some really clear pictures of how to start down this process, even though it was very based in the resort world, right? And that's not my world, but it gets you thinking that way a little bit, right? And which I really, really liked. And something near the end of the book, which I really appreciated as the kind of the final chapter to kind of sum things up, was the quote by Ulysses S. Grant about, not overthinking things. Like, how do I begin? Where do we start this thing, right? And I'll just say the quote, but anything is better than indecision. We must decide. If I am wrong, we shall soon find out, and we can do the other thing. But not to decide, waste both time and money, and may ruin everything. And I love that idea because I think that's where a lot of companies are. It's not that they don't want to be involved in sustainability. They don't want to be, they want to be a solution. They want to be part of the solution, but they don't know where to begin. And so they're kind of lost in indecision, right? So what is your advice to people? And it doesn't have to be to I don't think there's too many CEOs listening to this podcast, but people that are, working for a company, how do those people go about, helping their company to make these decisions and to commit to something and just start down this path of sustainability.
I think the key is action. That section with the quote from Ulysses S. Grant about needing to act is in reference to a company called Iberostar. Grupo Iberostar is a big Spanish chain with hotels. They're now global. They're all over the world, but they're very active in the Caribbean and in the Dominican Republic. And they, a few years ago, came up with this program called Waves of Change, and they've made the ocean and protecting the ocean kind of their singular focus, and then had that sort of radiate out into the operations of their company. So that is reducing single-use plastic so it doesn't end up in the ocean, working on restoring marine habitats in areas where they operate hotels, really thinking about the types of purchasing they do within the resorts. They're generally large, all-inclusive resorts, so that they're not buying, species of fish and seafood that are endangered, or they're not contributing to unsustainable practices. And they really just jumped in deep with this, and it really did not seem to occur to them that they're a company that's been around for 50, 60 years or more, and up until this program, I think they had done some things and done some work in different ways, but never sort of a focused program in this way. And I applaud that. I think it's fantastic that they just got in so deep, and it wasn't like, oh, well, should we start incrementally, or, this isn't our thing, so let's start with one program and build from there. They said, no, we're going to go all out with this Waves of Change program. And I think that is the type of action that we need with companies. Don't be humble and shy about the whole thing. Don't be timid. Like, let's get into it. You guys are experts in your field, in your industry, in your business. You're a successful business for some reason, so you have the capacity to take on this new idea of sustainability and add value to it in your area, in your region, in your business, in your industry. I think that's really the place where we are for many companies. So I think if you're an investment firm, if you're an architecture firm, if you're a building firm, hopefully we'll stop talking about, sustainable architecture or sustainable building. That'll just be the norm, right? Like, that'll be the baseline. And from there, you're either just a really good company or you're not. And I think that's kind of where we need to get companies to start thinking is, if any of these industries you work in, whether it's investing, banking, architecture, tourism, whatever, be the best in your company and be the most successful and most sustainable in the ways that you can, because you already know your industry better than anybody else. You already know your field better than any other company. And so where the challenges are, where the problems are, and very likely where the solutions are if you're willing to confront them. I think that's kind of the mindset that we have to take to that. Now, how do we get to that point is, you got to have some people inside pushing this agenda. I think too often within companies, sustainability is kind of, housed out in the, side project of the PR department, or, it's a marketing deal, or it's part of the maintenance department in hotels. But you got to have somebody this is their number one agenda. This is what they're working on all the time. And they become your chief problem solver of sustainability issues. And then, let it grow from there as you see that it creates value for the company.
You got to end up with the same problem, right? Because you just have one person or two people trying to solve all the company's issues, but it takes the entire company, right? It takes a community to do that. So I think, do you think that a good place to start for people would be to convince their company to just send out kind of like that Shark Tank thing, like just an email, a company-wide memo just saying like, hey, we want to hear your problems, and we're going to distribute those problems as a list, and people can go through them and try to solve them, and we can see where the solution comes from. Because to think that only the executive people have the answers is, I think, folly. But
yeah, that's absolutely right. I think engaging your employees and your collaborators in the process of problem solving is incredibly powerful. And You don't want to turn it into like a gripe fest. It's like, here, what are the major issues? Oh, it's that we don't get paid enough. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
That's not exactly the
What are the
sustainability
issues
issue.
to you accomplishing your goal as a job? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I do think that engaging the employees in creative ways and having them point out things that could be improved, places that within the company that could be that really need to be addressed. Sometimes the high level executive is not really seeing what's happening in the weeds, and so sometimes there's a lot of things that can be cleared up, and a lot of solutions that can be found that have a profound impact on your consumption patterns, on your spending, on your waste production, on your consumption of water or energy. The answers are often right inside the building, right?
Yeah.
The solutions are often already housed within the company, and it's a matter of engaging and really, taking advantage of these the skills you have. Finding that bartender who wants to make recycled plastic out of bottle caps is really an important and powerful mission for really any company.
Yeah. No, it's very cool. It's not something that I got reading this book that it was you need to be a high level executive to try to initiate this. This is something that anybody and everybody can do if you just start.
That's right. Yeah, and one of my favorite examples is a guy who he sort of has my job, but in the ski industry. Auden Schendler, who works at the Aspen Ski Resort, and he's been doing sustainability work there for a long time. And he's well known for hanging out in the maintenance shop and kind of jiving with the maintenance guys and the machinists to figure out what kind of problems they have, and then ways that he can infiltrate their operations and things they're doing to have a minimizing impact on the environment. I think that's incredibly important. A lot of the solutions are at the ground level of the company going up. Hopefully your CEO and your C-suite folks are all bought into sustainability and really want to see it happen and celebrate those small victories happening on the ground. But a lot of the work is going to happen on the ground.
Yeah. No, it's something you repeated a bunch of times was that there's way too many philosophers, way too many big ideas, and not enough grunts.
Right.
Not enough people willing to do the work. And no, I think I really enjoyed the book, man. Like it was really enjoyable. I think I got a lot of good takeaways from it. Started to paint a good picture of how businesses can be the solution that we're looking for, and how people can employees and people can start to contribute to that. So I really appreciate it. I don't know if you have any final thoughts you wanted to something else you wanted to say, some final advice or something before we finish things off.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. I tried to make the book as accessible as possible. I didn't want to have a textbook that only, sustainability nerds could understand. I really wanted to make it something that was just kind of an enjoyable read that people could, pull lessons out, whether it's in their sort of lifestyle or in their own jobs or hopefully something that could have a sort of a replicating impact in other companies. And I think the whole idea of waking the sleeping giant is we can make transformational change if we get existing companies and companies that at the moment are not contributing a whole lot to the sustainability conversation. If we can get these companies engaged in thinking about sustainability as a value proposition for their company, thinking about sustainability as really not just solving someone else's problem, but solving their own problems and contributing to their own benefit, I think we can really have a big transformative impact on some of the major challenges we're facing around the world. I think that was my goal. Writing the book, I never really thought about the experiences I was having as Puntacana as anything beyond, the realm and the importance of our own company. But the more time I've spent on it, and the more times I've spent with other companies and working with other partners, I've seen that what we've picked up along the years in Groupo Puntacana has a huge amount of value for sharing with other companies and helping them on their own sustainability journey. And for young people that are getting into this field, young people that are just thinking about sustainability, you don't necessarily have to start a new company to have a big impact. You can get into an existing company and you can really turn it on its head and get the existing companies to really have a major impact. I think that's a transformative power that companies have, and frankly one that's a little bit untapped, and one that we can really unlock this hidden power.
Absolutely. Well, it was part of the picture that you painted well, I think, was that you don't have to be a marine biologist or conservation researcher, or, you don't have to be in a green job or whatever to be part of the sustainability solution. You could be a steel worker or a bricklayer or whatever. And there's opportunities in every job where you can apply these ideas, which I think you did an excellent job, man. I think you should be proud. And I think there's definitely a lot of value here that people can get out of it and apply it to their everyday lives. So thank you so much for writing it, and thanks for taking the time to talk to me. It's been really enjoyable.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and thanks for your kind words about the book.
Thanks a lot for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that. I know I got some takeaways, and I feel a little more confident about what sustainability is and how to do it. So I hope you left that conversation feeling empowered and inspired. I know I did. And yeah, lots of cool conversations coming. Tell your friends, rate and review, share it on social media. All those kind of things help. I really appreciate it. And we'll catch you guys next time. Take it easy.